Scaling a business isn't all glossy headlines and overnight success. It's messy, it's tough, and it's full of lessons that no one warned you about. I'm Nikki Jupp, the founder of Talent Gateway, and I've helped over 100 scale-up leaders to build the right team to enable them to grow with confidence. This is Scaling Stories Unfiltered, where founders, CEOs, and leaders share what really happens behind the scenes. No fluff, no filler, just honest conversations to help you grow smarter. So let's get into it.
One of the really critical questions about scale is actually, what team do you need to be running this business successfully 3 to 5 years from now?
Yes.
And I think if I'd asked myself that question at the beginning, I probably would have gotten a co-founder with a fundraising background and let them take the lion's share of that. I love being in the conversation. I really enjoyed it and it really gave me some great ideas as well. It's broadened my thinking about where and how we scale.
In this episode of Scaling Stories Unfiltered, I'm joined by Elisa Krantz, co-founder of Mindbeat, a platform bringing coaching and leadership development to every level of an organisation. Ellie shares how her entrepreneurial family shaped her mindset, why she left a successful career in leadership consultancy to build something scalable, and the pivotal lessons she's learned about fundraising, resilience, and building the right founding team. It's a candid conversation about balancing purpose with scale, trusting your gut, and the myths around what it really takes to grow a business. Enjoy. So I am delighted today to be joined by Elisa Krantz, who is the founder of Mindbeat, which we will learn more about through this conversation. So firstly, thank you, Ellie, for agreeing to be part of this podcast. A huge welcome.
Thank you, Nikki. Great to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Great. So, as always, I like to just jump straight in with some questions. So, you grew up surrounded by what I would describe as entrepreneurial role models and diverse cultures. So, it'd be really interesting to get a little whistle-stop tour of your journey pre-Mindbeat.
Sure. I'm half Swedish, half Maltese, born in Switzerland, so a real mix of European north, south and centre, as one could say. I remember people asking me when I was young if there was a world war, which flag would you fly? And I'm like, none of the above. I'd be joining the UN and trying to help make peace. Yes, I had quite a few entrepreneurial and non-entrepreneurial role models in my life who've been really formative to me. I think I grew up with dinner table often being about business. And that's because my father was an entrepreneur, had his own trading business. My mother, who's Maltese, side of the family, we have a family business in Malta called Mitzi Organization. And so business was always weaved in and out to life. It was part of the journey of life and of things that we talked about, and fun and projects and challenges and so on. I also had my grandmother, my Swedish grandmother, had gone through quite a difficult divorce with my grandfather. When she separated, she had 5 kids and she had her back against the wall, as she often said. And she often said, still does at the age of 98, please note, that you don't really know what you're capable of until you have your back against the wall. Yes. And she took some land she'd inherited and turned it into a golf club, which became the largest golf club in Scandinavia. At a time when women didn't really do business, when she walked into banks, she'd be looked at suspiciously by bankers who were thinking, what do we do now? And when business circles were very much a boys' club. Yet she moved forward and she ran a farm. She developed a property that turned into a golf club, built property alongside that, and had quite a clear vision for that. So I think for me, the lessons were that if you've got an idea and you can see a market opportunity, there's nothing to hold you back from giving it a go. And I think gave me a real sense of empowerment and of hustle and of belief. That doesn't mean it's always easy, but I think that sort of idea of entrepreneurial initiative, I think, really came from there.
Wow, that is really inspirational. What a woman. 5 children as well.
Really, really is. Can you imagine? I'm not sure which is the biggest achievement.
Yeah, me neither. That's a whole different podcast, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
Clearly inspiration from both sides of the family, really interesting culturally. So Tell me a little bit more about sort of your career and the choices you made that got you to the light bulb moment or the idea concept of Mindbeat.
So I spent probably about 15 years of my career in management consultancy, working a lot with leaders and teams. And 7 of those years, almost 8, were with YSC, which is a leadership advisory consultancy that's recently, last year, was acquired by Accenture. And we specialized in senior leadership assessments, coaching, top team development, culture advisory work. And it was a real privilege because I got to learn from some incredible leaders who were helping typically M&As, the boards thinking through who is the leadership team of the future, helping leaders think through the next step to grow and succeed in their roles. So assessment and coaching were a fundamental part of what we did, but it was very bespoke, very expensive, very hard to scale, and quite hard to measure, actually. And so I saw the incredible power of that sort of proposition. And one of the things I wanted to do was to go to India to set up and found the India business, which I absolutely loved. India's my second home, just add another country into the mix. Still have a lot of incredible clients and friends based there. When I went to India, there were 2 pivotal moments, which I think crystalised my decision to co-found Mindbeat. One of those was there were lots of firsts. So first time managing a team, first time being a member of a leadership team that was regional. I was often the youngest around the table, the only white person around the table with my Indian clients, often the only female, full of imposter syndrome. And it got me thinking, how can people like me who are going through those inflection points earlier in our careers access the power of the stuff we do with a very top team of FTSE 100 businesses? And how can we make it more accessible, more affordable, more scalable, all of those? And then the second pivotal moment was I was doing some culture and top team development work with a client. I was working with about 3 clients in tandem. And about 2 or 3 years in, it occurred to me that even though we'd done some incredible work, top team was brilliant, really great CEO. We'd helped place and assess some people. We did some amazing team coaching work, getting really great feedback from them and the stakeholders, the board, their team. And it was about change, and it was about driving a culture that was different. And when we went down 4 levels lower, 2 years later, we realized nothing much had changed. And it got me thinking, gosh, like what we're doing works, but it doesn't scale. It works at the top. And so the idea was then to create a platform that solved both of these problems. One is giving people access to coaching at different points, not only for the top, but people going through transitions earlier in their career. And secondly, aligning the change you're driving at the top with the change at an individual level across the organization, so that you're, in a sense, empowering change from the inside out rather than from the top down. And that was hugely powerful and impactful. One of the first companies we worked with when we started Mindbeat, a body shop who'd gone through a transition in ownership, and they were navigating culture change, new sets of behaviors, values, wanting to align store managers with what they wanted to do at the top. And so we put this to test in that very real environment. And the feedback was incredible because a lot of store managers were saying for the first time, I'm not just understanding the journey that my senior leaders are going through, I've got a coach working alongside me to make it real. I've got a system to help me track and measure it. So that was really where the journey started. And those were some of the influences from my earlier career that shaped the foundations.
So it's very different to work in the management consultancy space. And then I find it interesting because we're surrounded by these very inspirational family members in the home. But how did you make the transition to get Mind off the ground? Clearly you had this first client. Often, and I know, it's one thing to get an idea off the ground, it's another one to turn it into a business that can scale. So just share that part of the journey.
How we went from idea to making it a real business that had legs. Is that your question?
Yes.
It's so many elements to it. So I'll try and pull out the things that are most critical to the journey. I think, first of all, once I had the idea, there was the piece of developing the kind of what's this going to look like, the business model, what kind of skills do we need in our team now, what do we need in terms of funding and capital. So there were all of those fundamental questions, and I was very fortunate, still am, to have some incredible advisors, clients, mentors who put some skin around the bone to make it work. So I think it was then about, let's develop what we call the MVP. And I think the idea of an MVP is something which I still hold on strongly. The idea of, okay, what's the minimum product is a platform that connects coaches through a very clear user journey with a coaching program that is delivered to employees and companies. This is the problem we're trying to solve. This is what the program could look like. It helps solve these problems for these sets of clients. And then what's the minimum number of coaches we need? So we identified, okay, we need 60 coaches to go live in these sort of countries. We need these sort of parts of the journey. We need an MVP technology platform, which has this kind of UX journey. So we built everything in an MVP fashion. It wasn't about it being brilliant. Even the kinds of clients, we knew that we can't really test this with a highly regulated industry. This should be tested with companies who are a bit smaller, more agile, willing to test with us in a very open, transparent way. And that's, I think, what sort of started to make the product real. Then we had to get domains, get minimum team, invest the first amount of capital to get the financing going, set up the corporate structure, etc., etc. So that was the sort of first stage. I think the second stage of growth was really our clients. It was having conversations with people in different companies, understanding, sharing the idea. This is what we think we're trying to solve. Does this solve problems? Where are you solving this problem right now? What's missing? What would great look like? And in a sense, going with clients on a journey. And I think one of our values is human. Our three values are human, impact, which is really about making change, and science-led, which is using data to back everything from the journey to the results and so on. So we really believe in partnership as part of our value of being human. So being open with clients about what we're trying to scale and how, and exploring with them where and how this could solve their problems. That was where we started, and that helped us build up a set of clear use cases to solve specific problems for specific types of clients. And that is, I think, what helps us scale, because I think it's very tempting at the very beginning to say we can do anything and everyone. Especially as a consultant, because coming from the consultancy world, you're very agnostic. You can flex and bend. I mean, you've got your proposition, your service, but actually it's extremely flexible. Whereas when you're building a platform, you realize that a large corporate from the pharmaceutical industry is going to need these 5 steps and these sort of sets of configurable functionalities. A scale-up is going to need something completely different. A bank is going to need something completely different. Senior executives are going to need something different to first-line managers. So you have to make your choices really thoughtfully, because otherwise you can get that initial wave of scale. You've got to 10 clients quite quickly. But your next wave of scale, you realize you've created a bit of a hodgepodge of a platform actually really scalable and becomes a bit of a blocker for the next phase of growth. And I wouldn't say that is a process we've perfected. I think if my team here listening to me, they'd be saying, we're still on that journey. But it's been a really important sort of learning, I think, keeping that openness to learn from the market and clients around what they need, with those sort of blinkers to help you focus on what we are going to do and what we're not going to do to make it scalable.
And how did you make that mindset shift, having many years in consultancy, as you say, where you can mold a consultancy to solve, and that's half of it, it's bespoke to the client. Very different mindset, as you've just articulated. How did you make that transition?
Good question. I think for me, it came back to my personal purpose with Mindbeat. Part of my raison for setting up Mindbeat was I wanted to broaden the impact of what I could see was possible and of the work I was doing myself with my clients, because I was limited by the number of hours, as we all are in consultancy and professional services. You are limited ultimately by the unit of time. So I wanted to create a platform to allow us collectively, not just me, but our incredible community of coaches, to share that insight, that sort of value, that potential to help grow people across a wider canvas. And in order to do that, I had to let go of some stuff that I did previously, which could have been great short-term revenue. So, for example, senior level assessments, and executive coaching, which I did myself.
Yeah.
I had to make some choices as to where I would do it, which would be in 10% of my time as opposed to 100%, which is what I did previously. And with my team as well, I had a very early co-founder who was our sort of head of technology and was then succeeded by Slaven, our current head of technology, having conversations about what we can and what we can't do and the importance of making those choices.
Yes.
I consciously let go of some elements of the consultancy suite, which of course would be nice to add, but adding those would mean slowing down the purpose of scaling our core proposition. And our proposition is about building stronger leaders, thriving teams, better business. It's about growing great leaders. And it would be lovely to do senior level assessments and all of the other consultancy advisories, but doing that would have prevented the ability to scale the core proposition we did want to grow.
Just making those, brave probably isn't the right word, but those vital business decisions, otherwise you spread too thinly.
You spread too thinly. It also has a knock-on impact on the kind of business you build. I also thought if I were to go down the route of building an assessment, because there's many ways to service that purpose I mentioned earlier about broadening the impact and helping grow leaders. I could have gotten together with some of my phenomenal trusted colleagues from my YSC days, many of whom I still work with, and I could have gone down the route of setting up a boutique consultancy, but that would have been a different business model. I would have probably set up a partnership where we would have been the co-owners of a firm, if you like, which is a different model to the route we took, which was to go out and raise capital to build a technology-based scalable platform. So it's about those choices.
And that's a beautiful segue into a question around being a female founder, co-founder, and fundraising.
Yeah, my goodness, isn't it just? It was interesting, the whole journey of fundraising. It's taught me so much about so many things. In many ways, I think when we went through our third funding round, which was in London about 2 years ago, just over, the level of conversations I had, I thought, gosh, I wish I'd had these conversations 2 years ago, because it just, the exposure, the questions, the ability to rigorously and ruthlessly prod your assumptions about everything, business model through to the types of coaches, through to your exit plan, all of that, I think are actually really good questions and really good thinking for anyone, whether you're thinking of looking for external capital or not.
Yes.
I did find it was a tough time. The market was starting to contract, and thankfully we had a really great couple of years. So we decided actually we don't need to raise as much as we'd like to in this market. And it helped us in some way think about this business more sustainably for the long term and make a choice to back ourselves, raise less, retain more of the ownership of the business, which I'm really glad we did. But the experience of fundraising as a female business person, so I had a number of different advisors sort of telling me, sort of, listen, it's a very male-oriented world, just keep that in mind. And I myself had gone through in my previous hat at YSC, where I did a lot of profiling and assessment with my business psychology sort of training, noticing that when you would profile assess women leaders for businesses, they would often be reluctant to take that next level job unless they were 120% ready.
Yeah.
Whereas if you assessed their equivalent, exactly the same type of skills and readiness and so on in men, often men were like, I'm fine, I'm 50% ready, but I'm fine, bring it on. They would tend to back themselves. Obviously, a huge generalization doesn't apply to everyone, but that was largely what colleagues of mine and I saw. So a couple of things. I want to know the websites of the fundraising businesses where the funds were talking to, the VCs, were very male-oriented. Pictures of men. Often you'd see a female who's maybe the secretary in the corner taking notes. So it gave you a very strong sort of impression before you even walked in and had those conversations. Mix of different people in those conversations. But I think the big learning for me was the feedback I got, which was a number of people said, but where's that hockey stick? Why aren't you adding on even more zeros to the picture of the future? And I said, look, if that's what people want to see, very easy to do that, but that's not what I'm going to do, nor not what we're going to do. We're going to put numbers that we believe we can achieve. Yes. And so I was perceived, and probably was, more cautious about our future trajectory. And that sort of was one factor. Then the second factor was when it came to talking about value and valuation, there was more challenge for us to reduce our value. And the feedback I got for that, what I got told by lots of investors, was that we're so used to entrepreneurs 10xing their value and adding lots of bullshit into their hockey stick, that often the value is completely unrealistic. So it was a bit of a double whammy. So I had a really quick learning, which I did, was to say, okay, I've got to show the picture of potential and be clear about what I think is achievable, but I've got to play the game to some extent in terms of showing the art of the possible out there. To not undervalue the business, because this is not just about me, but it's about our business and it's about our investors and our community of coaches and our team and so on. And also holding on to my values. So it was a really good, thickened my skin, definitely. And I'm grateful for the experience. But I also found it was so time consuming. It was fun and interesting, but I missed running the business, to be honest. And it took me away from that a lot. So if I had to do it again, I'll do it in a slightly different way, I think.
And in what way? That's quite interesting.
I think there was a lesson for me around actually like, what's my co-founding team like here? And I think that's an important question. You asked about scale earlier, Nikki, and I think one of the really critical questions about scale is actually, what team do you need to be running this business successfully 3 to 5 years from now?
Yes.
And I think if I'd asked myself that question at the beginning, I probably would have gotten a co-founder with a fundraising background and let them take the lion's share of that. I love being in the conversation. I really enjoyed it and really gave me some great ideas as well. It's broadened my thinking about where and how we scale. But I think I missed a trick in terms of my co-founding team at the beginning, probably not really thinking about that in the very early days.
So interesting. They're the kinds of conversations that we try and have so often, but often we find, because obviously that's what we do, that's my day job, getting the right people in the right team for that scale and ultimately exit, because it changes the types of people you need.
Exactly.
So the conversation is easier with you now if you've been through it before.
Yes.
Because when we have those conversations with someone who's been there before, they're like, it's a no-brainer. We know we need help. I know I need the right people. If somebody hasn't been through it before, that's a tough conversation.
Yes, completely. Now, I have to say, I think where we benefited from that and learned, one of our first investors was an incredible VC based in Malta, but offering funding and technology and mobile telecoms expertise globally, which is Go Ventures. And Patil and Paul at Go have been incredible allies and partners. And for our future fundraising efforts, for our thinking, and just the spirit of long-term partnership, they've been phenomenal. So I'm really grateful, actually. Like, for me, I think they really stepped in and stepped up and helped me think. And I know will continue to help me think as we think through the further growth journey of Mindbeat.
And I think team doesn't always have to be somebody who's in the business. It is about surrounding yourself in some way, shape or form with people who can help, guide, challenge you and ask all the uncomfortable questions.
Exactly. And sometimes really uncomfortable questions. In fact, both are on my board. And sometimes I leave the board meetings feeling a bit like, oh my God, man, those questions. But it's great. You definitely want to be kicking around tough questions together as a team on the inside rather than on the outside.
You want to grow, constantly grow, don't you? It's not just about growing the business, it's about growing you as well.
Absolutely.
More about you and your sort of personal growth, I guess, now, as opposed to the business itself. Growing a tech company is intense. How do you manage your own resilience and well-being? We're chatting privately just before we started this interview just a little bit, but it'd be really interesting to hear that side of things from you.
So it's an ongoing process. I think resilience is coming together of so many things, and as we talked about earlier, it's keeping that sort of balance is more of an art than a science. It can feel great one week and less grounded the next week. But I think for me, I've learned that resilience grows with life experience. I think I am more resilient today than I was 10 years ago, than I was 20 years ago. And part of that is because I think I've learned that sort of, even when you go through lows, through tough times, everything is relative. And I think for me personally, some things that help me is keeping a sense of perspective. I think about the worst or toughest moments I've been in, and I think actually compared to that, this isn't as tough. For example, I lost my brother when he was very young. He had a terminal illness, so he was only 23, and I was 25 at the time. So I think compared to that, this is actually not as bad. So that sense of perspective. And I talk to different people, other founders, and I know people are all navigating stresses and difficulties. So I think that's one. I think secondly is surrounding myself with colleagues. I've got some amazing friends, family members, other founders who run other businesses, my direct family, of course, who really help me keep grounded. And I try to balance things out. A lot of people tell me nurturing relationships and keeping in touch with family. I've got a very big family, as you can imagine, Switzerland, Sweden, Malta. Calling up cousins or aunts, something I do, not as regularly as I'd like to, but I do. And I think that's what keeps me grounded. Doing the same with friends, getting together with communities of other business leaders, founders, running businesses. And then I think the third thing is sports and silence. I think we talked about this earlier, Nikki, but I find because I'm with people a lot, running a business, as I mentioned, I also sit on the board of the Coca-Cola bottling business in Malta. I'm in meetings a lot. So I think for me, weekends as well, having downtime, not talking to people other than my immediate family, my kids, is a really big one. So I think keeping that balance, the different needs, is really important. It's not always easy, it's not always straightforward. And I mentioned that I was navigating a separation last year. So that was also something to go through. And in that situation, which was incredibly tough, navigating running a business, a separation, I think these elements really helped me keep resilient and grounded and helped me remind myself that I'm not superhuman, but knowing my limits and knowing how to care for those, I think, within reason, helps me stay sane.
I think you do well at spinning all those plates, actually.
Not so sure, not always.
One thing that I like to find out from people, are there any sort of books or frameworks, be they business or personal, that over time you've either happened upon or been recommended that stand out for you? Because I think that's quite nice to share with other people.
I think there's a couple of things. So one book which I read earlier and I reread every now and then, which is a really simple book. I think I even got it here. Yes, I do. Is Built to Sell by John Warrillow. And I recommend this whether you're selling a business or not. That is one of the end games we may want to have, but that's not our primary goal. Like, we want to build a business that is great, delivers great value for our end users at the end of the day, our participants who are experiencing the Mindbeat coaching and who are growing, because companies don't grow unless people grow. So that's ultimately the goal of the business. But it's helped me think about some fundamentals to get in place to make the business less dependent on me as a person and to try to make it more scalable. And that's always a healthy habit. I think if somebody, God forbid, gets run over by a bus, how do you have a system that is working, that can scale? And it's really simple. It's told like a story, really easy to follow. And I think other things that I tune into, podcasts. I loved the podcast by the Chief Revenue Officer of HubSpot. I forget the name, but I think from that I've taken some elements of how to think about scaling sales, which is some of the fundamentals of selling and building business and building partnerships in our industry, the process and how you make that sort of scalable. I think there were some incredible learnings from that. On a more personal level, I love the book, The 4-Hour Week. One of my best friends teases me and says, "Oh, you're always reading that." It always pops up once every couple of years because it's got some really good habits, productivity hacks. Am I spending my time on the right things? Am I doing the things that play to my strengths? Fundamentally helping me play to my strengths and be happy and make sure that the people around me and my team are also.
I think I might have a look at that one.
I think it's a really good one. The thing that for me, Nikki, I think also really helps in terms of my continual growth and learning is I have a network of a few people, clients, advisors, mentors whose brains I love to pick every now and then. And particularly as I've had to think about my own leadership and how I lead my team, how I show up for my people, how I help my leadership team show up for their teams, how we think about how we show up with our coaches and our partners. I think talking to and being able to work with this network of, I'm going to call them coaches, because even though they're also clients, they're advisors, some actually I do also have my own coach as well. But I think that network of the kind of collective coaching brain really helps me to think about my own growth and how I dial up the things I need to perhaps develop and improve.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's really insightful, unsurprisingly. One question, and you did touch on it earlier, so there might not be another answer, but looking back, I know you're still on that journey, it's still exciting. Is there anything that sticks out that you probably would have done differently?
I think there's always things I would do differently, and that's good because it means we can change and we can put them into practice for the future. Yeah. But I think the point I mentioned earlier about thinking about what's your vision, your end game, I think I would have been more choiceful even earlier about the niches that we go off, where we do our best work, and sort of the choices about what we say yes to and what we say no to. I think secondly, being more strategic, I would say, about the co-founding team and about the kind of capital raising on the journey, because that could have probably saved me some time. I think those would be actually the two biggest ones. Oh, and a third one is, I think, also really listening to your gut and your intuition. Because often when I have a gut feel, I'm quite data-based, so I like to go and get the data to back that up. But when I've looked back, sometimes I've said, I knew this, I could have gone faster if I'd not needed those data points to the same extent. So the analytical side of my brain likes those data points, but the intuition, I think I've gotten better at that over the years, is just actually going with my gut more and relying less on data. Enough data, but not the same quality.
Yeah, it's so interesting that, as you say, I think some of that comes with time, maturity, experience, because people say, oh, don't trust your gut too much. You need the data, but if you follow the data too much, you ignore your gut.
Yes.
It's finding your way, isn't it, in terms of...
Yes. And I think it's funny, but as you get into your 40s, I remember again hearing this from clients, that you become clear about what you want, what you don't want, and more confident in somehow what your intuition is telling you.
Yes.
Not more confident as a person, but more confident in listening to that instinct without needing to also do the rational analytical thing of getting the data points. And I think that's also, in a sense, one of the really great things of life experience, that actually you come into your own more quicker to make those assertive choices about what you want, whether it's in people, in co-founders, the team you surround yourself with, and the kinds of clients you want to work with. I think that sort of is also part of the life milestones. As a psychologist, I know, but I'm experiencing that more for myself now.
Yeah, I know from my perspective, it was when I got to my 50s, for me, I then started to really think, you know what, and just trust your own. And also, I don't know whether it is just a female thing, but for me personally, it's just having that confidence to say, I know what I want. And it's okay to just drive that forward and don't second guess yourself too often.
Exactly. Although there's a flip side to that, and my team often call me out on this to say 80% is good enough.
Yes.
Because I can be quite demanding on certain things. I know what I want, I know what great looks like.
Yeah.
It should be here, not here. And that can sometimes slow things down. Yeah. So there's a flip side to having that clarity and that sort of assertiveness, but also when it comes to the fundamental of how you scale, what do you compromise on and what do you really hold that sort of 100% on, and where is 60% good enough to allow you to move faster.
Yeah.
Not an easy one.
No, yeah. I know. And like we said right at the beginning, we're constantly learning. It's what you've got to let some things go. And that's when it gets important, because you're scaling a business, that trust with those people that you've got wrapped around you, your peers, both in the business and external to the business, they challenge you and help you, tell you to let go.
Exactly. Whether you want to or not is another question. But
yeah, exactly. So look, I'm just about getting towards the end of my questions, and I have one final question. There are lots of myths out there about scaling a business, and I think you've also touched on one a couple of times during the conversation, which is about thinking about exit, and keep that in mind or don't keep it in mind. But are there any other myths that you would like to about scaling a business for those people who might be listening?
Good question. Any myths? I don't know if this is, because a myth obviously assumes that it's quite a well recognized truth or a statement that is quite an often repeated statement. I don't know how often repeated this is, but I've often heard build to sell, even though I love the book. The advice that's often come with that is build it today how you want it to be in 5 years' time. So that's build now for the end scaled journey. And there's certainly some truth to that in terms of think about having your processes and so on. But what I would bust about that myth is the fact that actually you have to keep iterating. And if you build too much too soon, you could be building wrong, and you could be running out of mind, whether you're spending too much time on a particular type of function that you think you're going to need, you think the market's going to need, and actually the market has moved on by the time it's ready. Or maybe the market has moved in a different direction. Or you might be spending a lot of resource on that when actually the business, especially in the early days, you need to adapt your approach to the stage of maturity and the number of clients and the revenue that you have coming in. You have to calibrate it. Yes, keep the end in mind. MVP it, iterate. That's more for me what has worked.
Brilliant. And that, I think, is a wonderful note to finish on. I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation. Learned lots, as I'm sure any Izzy is going to listen to this conversation. So I just want to say a big thank you for being part of this podcast series, and I look forward to releasing this episode.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nikki. Really enjoyed it. You got me thinking a lot. And,
Good.
Thanks so much, and look forward to hearing more of your other episodes as well.
Perfect.
Thank you for bringing this to us.
My pleasure.
That's it for this episode of Scaling Stories Unfiltered. If you got value from today's conversation, hit the subscribe and leave a comment. It helps us bring even more real conversations your way. Got a scale-up challenge, a story to share, or want to recommend someone for me to interview? Drop me a note in the comments below. Until the next time, keep scaling, keep learning, and remember, you're not alone on your scale-up journey.